Welcome in, guys. I'm here with Joe Lisi. You can find him on Twitter at Go4the2. He's one of the best minds in college football. His work is at his website at go4the2.com. Joe, welcome in. How you doing today, buddy?
Always a pleasure, Drew. Getting ready for week one of the season. We start tomorrow night. Doesn't get better than this. We'll be full throttle from now until January.
Yeah, and especially this weekend, Thursday through Monday, we got big matchups. It's one of the best weekends of the year, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's arguably one of the best weekends of college football in recent years, possibly even a decade. I mean, interconference battles, you have ACC, SEC, SEC, Big Ten. Doesn't get better than this. And I'm really curious to see how these games play out this coming weekend.
Yeah, likewise, brother. Well, let's start off in an SEC matchup, but they're going against the Conference USA team. We got game number rotation 193, 194. The Kentucky Wildcats actually heading down to Southern Miss to Hattiesburg, Mississippi to take on Southern Miss in what was a really exciting game last year where the underdog actually came out and won outright. Joe, what are your thoughts on this year's matchup?
Yeah, it was. It was an intriguing game last year that Kentucky dominated for the first half of that matchup. They held a 35-10 halftime lead over Southern Miss before Nicky Mullins and Ito Smith came back and won that ball game in convincing fashion, 44-35. Kentucky's defense really wore down against the up-tempo attack of Nick Mullins. We have to see how this game plays out this coming weekend, but I give the edge to Kentucky. I like Kentucky here. I like their quarterback, Steven Johnson, along with running back Benny Snell, who was a 1,000-yard rusher last year with Boom Williams. So they had a dynamic 1-2 punch. He's a dynamic running back that has great vision. And this is a team in Kentucky that could surprise some people from an offensive perspective. You look at Southern Miss defensively, a lot of starters gone from last year. But more importantly, I think it's the speed of Kentucky, what they're able to do. I think they can stretch Southern Miss's defense vertically. And I think they win this ball game in convincing fashion. I think Kentucky wins more this coming weekend.
Okay, yeah, and this game's at 4 o'clock Eastern on CBS Sports Network. As far as so you're looking to lay the 10 with Kentucky. And any thought on the total? It looks like it's about 57, 57 and a half, depending on where you shop.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting total to me. I mean, in terms of that total, it's sort of low in my opinion. I would take the over with that matchup. Last year, I mean, 44-35. The up-tempo attack really caught Kentucky by storm in the second half. They wore down. I think from a conditioning aspect, that'll be where they're much improved. They allowed over 200 yards per game last year in their front seven, but I think the speed of Kentucky is the difference. I think I would lay the points here. I like Kentucky as a favorite in this matchup. Again, I don't think this is an elite team in the East. I picked them at 6-6 overall, but they have offensive talent, and I think they have a speed advantage over Southern Miss's defense in this ball game. Jay Hobson's done a fantastic job. But again, I think when you lose a quarterback in Nick Mullins, a new inexperienced quarterback at the helm, Southern Miss will probably have to run the football with Ito Smith against that front seven. And I think that's why you're seeing the total in the 56.5, 57 area.
Yeah, the clock could be running for sure. And so it looks like Joe's looking to lay it with the favorite. And Joe, moving on, we got the Florida State Seminoles versus the Alabama Crimson Tide. And what is likely it is the marquee matchup of the weekend. It's 8 p.m. Eastern on ABC. And this total's dipped below 50 now, pretty much 49, 49 and a half, depending on where you're shopping. Looks like 5 Dimes has it at Alabama minus 7.5. It's pretty much minus 7 across the board anywhere else. What are your thoughts in this big game?
Yeah, I mean, Alabama hasn't lost a week one game, Drew, since 2001 to UCLA. They won 15 straight by an average margin of victory of 25.4 points per game. When you look at Florida State overall, Florida State is 9-1 in their last 10 games against the SEC. They've won those games by 15.8 points per game. More importantly, since 2010, they're 7-1 on week one of the season and won those games by 34.4 points per game. For me, it comes down to, can Florida State attack Alabama's secondary? Minus Marlon Humphrey and minus Eddie Jackson, I think they can. When you look at Alabama as a whole last year. They allowed 3 teams to throw for over 400 yards. It was Austin Allen in Arkansas, it was Ole Miss and Chad Kelly, and it was Deshaun Watson and Clemson. I think when you look at the 6 months off in terms of preparation, I give Jimbo Fisher the edge to come up with an offensive game plan to challenge that Alabama defense vertically. And I think they strike the upset. Although I think it's a low-scoring game, I'm calling for the upset. Florida State 24-20 over Alabama in this ball game.
Wow, calling for the outright win from the underdog. And what about giving Nick Saban extra time to prepare? That doesn't and Jalen Hurts off of his first offseason after being the starter. Are you factoring that in, Joe?
Yeah, I factor it all in. I'll tell you this, from a defensive perspective, Alabama led FBS with 54 total sacks. 36 and a half of those went out the door due to graduation or NFL draft picks. You look at the offensive side of the ball, they lose Cam Robinson, they lose Ardarius Stewart and tight end O.J. Howard. They have offensive playmakers there, but you look at 2 areas of concern for Alabama last year. Third down conversions at the end of the year were a concern for Jalen Hurts. Against Washington, they converted 4 of 14 third down conversions, 28% in the national championship game. It was 2 of 15, which was 13%. When teams forced Jalen Hurts in the pocket, he struggled as a consistent quarterback. They do now have a new offensive coordinator in Brian Daboll, and I've said this before, when you have a new offensive coordinator, that coordinator has to understand the talent and how that talent responds in game situations. He has to call a game plan around that talent, and more importantly, he might be more or less aggressive than his predecessor, in this case, Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin not given enough credit for what he was able to do in terms of allowing his playmakers the opportunity to catch the ball in one-on-one matchups in space. And I think that's where Brian Daboll could struggle as an offensive coordinator. Might take a whole season for this unit to gain continuity and cohesiveness. And that's why I like Jimbo Fisher with sophomore quarterback DeAndre Francois.
Yeah, great point on the Alabama OC situation. I haven't heard a lot about that, but definitely could be a factor. And Joe, we just talked about an SEC-ACC matchup. Let's talk about one more here. This is Monday night, the key matchup on Monday night. It's actually the only college football game on Monday night. It is the Tennessee Volunteers making the short trip down to Atlanta, Georgia to play in Bobby Dodd Stadium against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Looks like Tennessee's laying 3, a total of 56. You think Tennessee can go into Atlanta and win by more than a field goal?
Well, they can, but it's going to be upset city, baby, like Dick Vitale. I really like Georgia Tech in this matchup. Couple of factors. It's the triple option attack. It's a lot different in game speed than it is in practice situation. You're talking about a Georgia Tech team that was 3-0 last year against SEC opponents. They beat Vanderbilt, Georgia, and Kentucky, and really dominated both Vanderbilt and Kentucky in those ball games. They came from behind against Georgia. You're talking about a Tennessee team that loses defensive end Derek Barnett along with their top linebacker, Jalen Reeves-Maybin. With them in the lineup, Drew, this defense allowed 218 rushing yards per game. They allowed 4 opponents last year to rush for over 300. They allowed 353 to Texas A&M, 409 to Alabama, 443 to Kentucky, and 420 to Missouri. Even though Georgia Tech doesn't have their leading rusher, Dedrick Mills, that was kicked off the team, to me it doesn't matter. It's a scheme advantage for Georgia Tech. You need big defensive linemen that can clog running lanes and disrupt the timing of the triple option. If Georgia Tech jumps up early like I expect them to, I think it's going to be a long day for Tennessee. They have a new quarterback in Dormandy. They lose Alvin Kamara and Jalen Hurd along with wide receiver Josh Malone. Those are major losses for Butch Jones, coupled with the fact that he's on the hot seat. I don't care what anybody says. Butch Jones needs to come through this year. Otherwise, in my opinion, I think he'll be on the outside looking in for a job. So I think the pressure's on Tennessee. The game is played in Atlanta, so that'll benefit Georgia Tech. 33-20, Georgia Tech gets the victory over Tennessee in this ball game.
I like it, Joe. Obviously, you know your stuff, and we'll be doing this every Wednesday. Find Joe Lisi on Twitter @GoForThe2. Check out his work at his website, also at Go for the Two. Joe, any other thoughts, maybe overall thoughts going into week 1 college football, the opening week, maybe something for newer bettors to take in, what to look for in week 1, to also use going into week 2 betting? Anything like that you wanna let the listeners know?
Yeah, I think the one thing that you want to keep an eye out for is understand where teams were strong or weak from the previous year, and more importantly, does it carry through in week number 1, or more importantly, week number 2 of the season? That's what you really need to key on. I mean, you could look at a team like USC. They were 5-1 last year when they rushed for over 200 yards. They won those ball games by 24 points per game. On the flip side, they held 6 of 13 opponents under 100 yards and won those ball games by 20.5 points per game. If you understand where teams are strong and weak from the previous year, you have a good read of where they can possibly have strengths and weaknesses in the upcoming season, especially in September. You want to see if those trends continue. That'll help you get a gauge as to where these teams stand in the early part of the year and make you win some money, especially in September and October.
All right, thanks, Joe. He's Joe Lisi. I'm Drew Martin. We'll be back next Wednesday with more college football breakdowns.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.